absolute joke, kind of like, I don't know, ESPN at this point. I've been dying to talk about this, but JJ Redick, talk about the shot, the interview, and the debate heard around the world. It's like it was rumbling last week where him and Kendrick Perkins were getting into a beef where I saw Kendrick Perkins have this dumb take where he's just like, I think Jokic is a stat patter. And then he was like, I think the NBA voters are racist because Jokic won 2 MVPs. So I'm like, okay, what's going on here? I need someone who's like inside the NBA who's probably the best voice for basketball right now. And that's JJ Redick. And JJ Redick goes on there and he's like, excuse, what did you just say? You just called and accused the NBA fans are racist, and then Kendrick Perkins is just turns into an NBC in the video game. He's like, I'm not, I did not say that. I didn't. It's like Tommy Wiseau, I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not. Oh, hi, JJ. And JJ's like, what are we doing? And then he just goes on this tangent where he's like, the problem with media right now, and the problem with ESPN is we just create these delusional storylines, these delusional takes like, oh, Jokic is a stat patter because I don't feel like I can argue with facts, stats, and logic that Joel Embiid is better. Like, no, I can make a legitimate case for Joel Embiid for MVP right now. You don't need to accuse the NBA MVP voters of being racist for that. And JJ's like, what are you even thinking right now? You can't just go out there and make statements like this. And the most telling thing was Stephen A just sitting there biting his lip like he was scared for his job if he said anything, because he can't disagree with JJ, but he didn't step in either. And he was kind of like, he kind of has a point, and Kendrick Perkins was kind of out of line. So for me, he kind of just nuked all these like B players who just come on ESPN and they're just like hot take machines. Like Emmanuel Acho, another guy, just tries way too hard with his takes. So he creates these delusional narratives like, oh, Justin Herbert's a social media QB. It's like they just don't exist in reality, like JJ said. And I thought it was so telling that as soon as he said that, I'm like, yeah, ESPN's it's just a first take machine, and you get paid if you don't mind looking like an idiot and being a clown.
Well, that's what the ESPN's model is at this point. It's outrage politics, honestly. But in the NFL, sports, baseball, basketball world, where they'll say the most ridiculous claims that they don't really believe, and then people get crazy. They go in the comments, they call them an idiot, and then they do the same shit the next day. It happens every fucking day.
Yeah.
And Kendrick Perkins is one of the worst offenders of this. And the fact that he's going out there with saying that like it would be racist for him to be the third player in NBA history to win the MVP 3 times in a row, even though Wilt Chamberlain did that in the 60s, Larry Bird did in the 80s, and now he would do it again. This is one of the greatest accomplishments of any player in NBA history. And we're talking about if he wins 3 MVPs, even if he never wins a title, he will go down as one of the best players of our time, of the 2020s, and of the late 2010s. So I think it's discrediting to somebody as great as the Joker. I think if you want to pick Embiid, it's fine. It's like, it's not that deep. You can also throw in Luka. You can also throw in Jason Tatum if you really want to. The MVP race, I think, it's still a competitive race. I mean, I think most people are going to go with Nikola Jokic, and he absolutely deserves it.
Yeah.
Numbers wise, he's one of the most efficient players in the NBA. He has the number 1 seed in the West, which at this point is loaded.
Yeah.
So for you to discredit him like that, I think compared to the East, absolutely.
Yeah, East is more top heavy, but yeah.
The East is like, I think there's like 2 or 3 legit teams. But needless to say,
for sure,
this Joker's team, since they started, has been one of the most dominant teams in the NBA. So what are we doing here? Why do you need to discredit somebody? And why do you got to make it a political issue at that point?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, it's not even like the fact that this came from JJ Redick, who's like, I feel like you should wake up in the morning, get your coffee, and shit on Trump. Like, that's something I agree with. So it's not like JJ Redick's no Republican. JJ Redick is deep in like the liberal ideology, and he's not one of these red pill guys where he makes it a thing to go out there and make combative statements that's kind of like pushing against like the media narrative. It's like, that's not who JJ Redick is at all. But he saw this and completely lost his mind because of how good Nikola Jokic is, where it's like, the fact that he didn't even have to make an argument and Kendrick Perkins like, you can't bring stats into this. He's like, we don't even know what the MVP criteria is. Like, yes, we do. You either do something historic that no one's done in a long time, a la Russell Westbrook, with Russell Westbrook also being the MVP, bring one of the worst teams in the NBA when everyone doubted him, Kevin Durant. So he's like, we have storyline, you doing something historic, or in combination with your playoff seeding and you being the number one seed. Well, Jokic doesn't have any all-star teammates. It was laughable because someone tried to say that Jokic had better teammates than Embiid. I'm like, I'm sorry, but Tyrese Maxey and
Oh.
James Harden.
You
Like,
know what else is ridiculous? You know what else he's doing? He's averaging a fucking triple-double.
yeah,
He's averaging a triple-double, and he's calling it a race thing, which
yeah.
is ridiculous. If you would have said that before Russell Westbrook's triple-double season, you would have been like, wow, this guy's averaging a triple-double. This is insane. And now it's a race thing?
Yeah.
Why? Russell Westbrook won the MVP, and he deserved it absolutely that year for averaging a triple-double.
Yeah, and the first time Kendrick Perkins said like the race thing, he was like, "Oh, I don't know. I think it's like there's only been like," he mentions the stat where there's like there's hasn't been a player who's not leading the league or not top 10 in scoring who's won the MVP, but he conveniently cuts it off where Magic Johnson, like after Magic Johnson. So it's like he's already doing like a little bit of like, let's cut up the narrative here with the timelines. And then the first time he said it, it was super telling. Stephen A was kind of like, oh, maybe I agree with you. And then when JJ Redick's going off on him on ESPN, JJ Redick was giving that speech like, I may get fired and not invited back to ESPN again after I make this statement. And then Stephen A. Smith is kind of just sitting there like sitting the fence with both guys. So he kind of lost a little bit of credibility where he's not like taking a definitive stand. He's kind of just like entertaining both. But I feel like he's kind of fallen back into a moderator in some of these situations, which I don't like. It's like he's a role he's good at, but I want to see him step in and be more vocal. Because like I know him and Kendrick Perkins and JJ were like beefing before, but Stephen A, I still want your input on the situation. Like I still want to know how you feel like with what JJ's saying and what Kendrick Perkins is saying, because Kendrick Perkins had absolutely no material to go back at JJ Redick. That was the most telling thing. Like someone who just uses like simple facts and logic. It's like, oh, these people are ridiculous. Like you can just go out there with a simple take and then they melt.